The story of poverty has often been one of helplessness. Passive beneficiaries of recipients of charity and aid with no agency or decision-making power. And as a social scientist studying the financial lives of people living in poverty, I've always wondered, how do people not only survive, but actually thrive with very limited resources? And in my travels around the world, I've seen such amazing examples of creativity and ingenuity. And I have to say that that story just never sat right with me. And the exciting thing is that around the world, we're seeing a shift in the story that we've been telling about poverty. So I'd like to tell you a bit about my own story. And you might be surprised to hear that I'm not just an observer of this behavior, I've also been a participant. I grew up in the former Yugoslavia, a country in southern Europe that experienced a devastating war in the 1990s. And this war was followed by a period of hyperinflation. It was crippling to the economy and to our lives. And for those of you trying to count the number of zeros, that's a 500 billion dinar note, depicting the face of a famous childhood book writer. As a 10-year-old navigating the world of adults, I would often go with my father on daily errands. Sometimes that would involve going to the bank and waiting in long lines for many hours for him to pick up his salary. He'd walk out of the building, cash in hand, and we'd walk around the streets looking to exchange the money on the black market for more stable foreign currency. So I was inspired. And on my walks back home from school, I'd take a little bit of a detour and go down onto the busy commercial boulevard, listening for the telltale whisper of somebody saying, "Devise, devise, devise, devise." That's how you knew that they were selling. So I'd approach them and ask them what their going rate was for US dollars or German Deutschmarks, and might they give a young child a discount if she exchanged a larger volume of money. And after some time of doing this market research, I started to offer it as a service to my parents. Now, by all standard poverty metrics, you would say that we were poor. But that's not how we defined ourselves, because we always found a solution to the challenges that we were facing. And sometimes they were a little bit creative, like becoming a 10-year-old currency trader. And I have to say that in the conversations that I've had around the world, people don't define themselves by this one single narrative of poverty. So in my work in international development, I've explored a lot of different approaches to reducing poverty. Some have been private sector initiatives with business solutions, and of course you might have heard of the big boom in microfinance. Others have been in the public sector, government social programs, large-scale interventions that give cash directly to the hands of people living in poverty so that they can make decisions for themselves and what they need. And what's incredible about both of these approaches and what drew me to them was that they put people in the center. There was no longer this expectation that I know what you need, but rather a shift towards listening to what people say that they need and allowing them to make the decisions for themselves. And this is the essence of participatory design. It's really involving people in the decision-making process and relinquishing the power so that they can be invited into the room and be part of the solution. What's exciting also is that we know that it works. Over the last 30 years, there have been more than 300 studies of these cash transfer interventions that give people power, decision-making power, that have demonstrated the effectiveness in reducing poverty statistics. And it's incredibly exciting. In fact, 1.5 billion people received cash transfers last year, and we actually saw a doubling in the amount of money that was being transferred into the hands of people. And a lot of that had to do with the pandemic. And some of you may have also received stimulus checks yourselves. So what's exciting about this is that we're seeing a massive shift and a global one. Now, I'm a big believer in systems. And what I love about these initiatives is that they're embedded into existing systems and structures, but they don't replace them. And also, I don't mean to simplify and say that it's something as simple as cash transfers that's going to transform the world, because it's not. We do need investments in systems. And actually, a recent study in India found that when you ask people if they would want cash in their pockets if it came at the expense of public goods and services, the answer was overwhelmingly no. So let me give you an example from my work. 10 years ago, I was working with the government of Colombia, and they had a large cash transfer program. And they were looking for creative solutions that would be low cost and scalable, where they could deliver financial training to cash transfer recipients living in remote rural areas, low-income women, many of them illiterate. So we naturally gravitated toward technology because we were trying to reduce the unit cost. But we did not have a clue as to what the content would look like, the user experience, heaven forbid, the delivery mechanism. How do you do something like this in a country so large? Well, we didn't have the answers, but we knew who did. So we invited women into the design process. And by opening it up and bringing their ideas in, we were able to actually design an effective solution. What we came up with was a high-tech, low-touch approach, a tablet-based app that circulated in the community by women leaders so that participants could actually go through the training in their homes rather than having to travel long distances to go and listen to a training. And in this process, what was really interesting was that we succeeded in changing knowledge and attitudes and behaviors, and we thought that we were successful because we were combining high tech and low touch, the perfect combination. But what we missed was actually that it was the element of trust that was the secret ingredient. That was where the magic happened. And we ended up delivering a program that came at a quarter of the cost of traditional approaches, and it went from a 600-person pilot, a test proof of concept, to then being replicated and scaled around the world in a dozen countries with almost 1 million people. So it's incredible the power that we can have in our solutions if we just learn to listen and invite in diverse voices. Today, I'm the executive director of MIT D-Lab, and I have the privilege of working with an incredible group of lecturers, researchers, practitioners, and hundreds of the most brilliant students and community partners, and we join forces to design for a more equitable world. And in this process, we engage in classes where we teach design for scale and work to understand how you manufacture at scale in low-resource environments. And we also research and study low-cost, affordable technologies that are locally relevant. And it's incredibly exciting because D-Lab has been doing this for the last 20 years. So it's a perfect place for me to continue the work and see what the future will hold. And I know some of us want to gravitate towards simple solutions, products or policies that are going to revolutionize the world. We're looking for that silver bullet. But maybe the silver bullet isn't a high-tech product or a new policy. Maybe it's something as simple as redesigning the poverty narrative. Thank you.